Yellowstone National Park's early morning silence was broken by a piercing howl, producing a shockwave of. Through the use of wildlife researcher Mar Ferry's adrenaline, she lifted her binoculars. With her heart racing, Marta was certain that she was going to see something remarkable because she had been following a pregnant. Luna, a gray wolf, was fascinated by the animal's strange behavior and the strained relationships that were growing between. She anticipated a typical crying situation with her group, a secret den, and a few newborn puppies during the alpha male's customary vigilant watch. But as the morning light showed Luna's silhouette in the distance, Marta realized that Luna had selected a unique berth. Isolated area surrounded by low plants and jagged rocks that Marta was familiar with from her many scouting excursions. But something. Marta noticed Thor the pack's enormous alpha from her vantage point. In a typical situation, an expectant alpha male keeps an abnormally broad berth. Luna was by herself as she paced, although females may be protected or even momentarily joined by other pack members. And with her ears pushed back in this manner, Marta seldom ever saw any indication of severe discomfort or suffering. Luna occasionally stopped to gaze into the gloom as though expecting. When Luna's contractions became apparent, Marta held her breath, feeling as though there was an invisible danger. Determined to document every minute, she was fixated on her binoculars when the first pup arrived with unexpected ease. Marta experienced an instant sense of relief as Luna swiftly cleaned the little gray bundle and pushed it closer for warmth. Everything was regular up until the second puppy arrived, and along with it, Luna's position abruptly changed, and the wolf gave a startled, quick yelp as if. Squinting, Marta attempted to discern the pup's features in the dim light, but even she was unable to believe what she was witnessing. The strange, almost contradictory fur pattern sent a shiver down her spine. Before Marta could comprehend the implications of this unusual baby, there was a possible echoing snap. Typical gray wolf puppies. Luna jerked her head in the direction of the sound as it echoed through the clearing from a limb breaking under her. Marta's heart raced even more forcefully as she tensed in unexpected alarm. Someone or something was nearby at the worst possible time, divided between her scientific. Marta's curiosity and need to maintain her distance made her realize that if a peculiar puppy was drawing attention, it could be seriously endangered, and so might. Mar's initial reaction was to freeze, unsure of whether to concentrate on the pup that looked like straying or. The mother wolf stayed crouched protectively over her newborn's ears in response to the unexpected noise that had scared Luna. Despite having expert experience, Marta felt her pinned back, looking for threats in the darkness. She struggled with the need to get closer, but years of field work reminded her that immediate intervention could upset the pack dynamic or cause the mother to become aggressive. So she gradually raised her camera lens to capture every detail of the second pup's fur pattern from a distance. In the morning light became more noticeable. The majority of newborn wolf pups have a consistent gray-black or dark, but this one's back appeared to have glaring white patches and erratic swirls, and its small ears remained a mystery. Looked somewhat curved at the tips, a characteristic Marta had never seen in any wild wolf she had seen genetically previously, but nothing like this, so she rushed in, her heart racing, attempting to take a picture. If the puppy lived, it would be the most innovative case study to date. An atypical offspring was not certain to be accepted by the pack. A deep growl came from behind Luna and Thor. The alpha male, who usually adopts a bonded position, came cautiously sniffing the air as he emerged from the shadows. At this point, the partner may lick or nuzzle the mother to reassure her instead. Thor lifted his hackles and fixed his eyes on the first pup, and the second pup wriggled unnoticed against Luna's abdomen, but the peculiar coloring of the second pup appeared to profoundly. Mar's uneasy hold on the camera became more firm when Wolf packs the alpha. Although males can be surprisingly loving, Wolf's anger toward an aberrant youngster wasn't unheard of. The pup might be rejected by society, or worse. Marta sensed with every second passing, Luna moved towards a possible tipping point. From Mar's perspective, it was evident that the mother was ripped as she positioned herself slightly between Thor and the puppies. Her lips curled back between impulse to protect her infants and dread. Snarl and silence, telling Thor to stay away. With a tight heartbeat, it appeared as though Thor may threaten her. Then he quickly turned his back and turned his ears in the direction of the same invisible area that had snapped a limb just before anything else appeared outside. Perhaps a subordinate wolf, making their way back to the cave region, possibly a lone grizzly or a scavenger coyote lured by the aroma of afterbirth, or worse, a human intruder who may not even be aware of it. Thor trotted a few paces towards the noisy shoulders, aware that they were entering a dangerous position. Stiff, obviously prepared to protect his area, Mar's thoughts whirled through what would happen if a predator. Any adult wolves in the pack would react violently to any threat to Luna's den Thor, which might lead to conflict. Catastrophe for the intruder, as well as maybe for the defenseless puppies she carefully adjusted after swallowing them. Camera to change focus. She had to take pictures of the den and the surroundings in order to comprehend what was going on. Suddenly, Luna gave a high-pitched, piercing bark that Marta knew was an urgent distress signal. In a matter of seconds, 2 additional wolves, a younger male and a beta female, bounded onto the scene to warn the other members of the pack. In order to create a loose defense line between the den and whatever was hiding inside, they positioned themselves close to Thor. The tension was evident beyond the darkness, crackling in the icy air. The whole park appeared to be holding its breath as Marta steadied her trembling hands. The moment seemed to go on forever. For a very long time, Marta contemplated whether or not to radio her colleague who was stationed at a nearby observation post, but she chose not to. Desire to create sounds that could agitate the wolves, and the sound of distant brush rustling intensified her perception of fear that a conflict could break out at any time, and if the wolves thought, a serious risk that they could desert or even turn against the puppies in a frantic. Her thoughts turned to the second pup's peculiar appearance as she struggled to survive. She couldn't get rid of the crazy thought that anything about the disruption might be connected to that. Because wolves are fiercely protective of their territory, this birth was drawing unwanted attention. However, the situation that was playing out in front of her was more severe than typical protective behavior if the pup scent or coloration caused the group to become confused, and there was a genuine chance that it might turn into an outsider. In a flash, Thor and the other 2 wolves ran into the tree's jaws, tearing Mar's eyes from the glass. The noise from snarling snarls, snapping branches, and the sound of something or someone battling Luna filled the thicket. Stayed at the den's entrance, trembling with fear, and sometimes she looked. Time felt elastic as she looked at her frail puppies, seemingly caught between staying put and hurrying to assist the pack in defending the territory. Mar's nerves were strained every second as her radio crackled softly at her hip. When a coworker attempted to contact her, she touched the device with a finger but was hesitant to respond if she talked at all. A quiet voice, the wolves could hear her, but if she didn't say anything, she may lose important information or a chance to contact for assistance if things get out of control. At that moment, the forest snarls grew louder in Mar's heart. Luna uttered a terrified cry as she pressed her muzzle into the odd puppy, as though pleading urgently. Whatever was going on behind those trees may determine not just the fate of the whole pack, but that baby wolf's life was different from everyone else's. She was hyper-focused on the commotion happening outside her line, and her lungs felt tight as she struggled to manage her breathing. Out of sight, the SN's growls and rustles in the brush intensified, reverberating against the lunar rocky outcroppings. Stayed on the den's doorway, shaking so badly that Marta could see her ribs enlarge even from a distance. The pups, one gray and one oddly marked, clung together with every accelerated breath. As if sensing the danger, they pressed against their mother's tummy, and for a little moment, quiet seized the woodland, and then 2 wolves suddenly resurfaced with a loud roar. The younger male was absent from Thor's front, as was the beta female. The beta female was hobbling, and her left shoulder was smeared with blood. Mar's heart was thumping since the conflict had obviously taken a toll. Concerned for the pack's well-being, she wishes she knew that injuries like this may be lethal if not handled in the wild. Could do something, but she knew better than to get in the way. Aluna strained her neck forward and let a guttural whine. Thor caught her fragrance in a half-risen position and instead met her gaze. He walked about the den, his ears flat and obviously irritated before. The alpha male appeared nearly frantic as he snapped at twigs, as he paced in, adrenaline still pumping through him. The beta female slumped into her hunches and began to pant heavily after having brief, restless outbursts. As though unsure of how to move forward, the eyes dart between Thor and Luna. The mood was tense, and Marta realized that the hierarchy of the pack would be in jeopardy if the alpha was. They could turn on the newborn pups, especially an abnormal one in extreme pain, or the group might get uneasy. She finally clutched her radio because stress wolves have been known to leave or even kill offspring who are seen as a liability. Choosing to answer her colleague's previous call, she hit the transmit button while maintaining a barely audible whisper. "I'm Marta, and I'm watching the recent injuries from the confrontation between Lun and Thor. Confirmed that the cause was uncertain. Wait for more information." She took a quick breath. A sudden static response was followed by a calm voice recognizing her message. Vantage point Marta saw movement in the foliage, so at least now the squad knew something was going on. The younger male wolf staggered into view behind Thor, pulling one hind leg. His flank was matted with blood, and he had a dazed, confused expression on his face. But what came next was more concerning. A lanky figure that was noticeably erect caused a human Mars heart to lurch. Hikers were numerous in Yellowstone, but coming onto an active den was rare. At best, it was an almost unimaginable error. A lone trayer was unaware of the risk. At worst, it might be a poacher or someone who wants to hurt the figure of wolves froze, seemingly realizing the seriousness of the situation involving Thor and the younger boy Bede. Now that Mar could see that the man was a man, their lips curved back in a terrifying show of power. Lifted his arms defensively, as if to make himself look bigger, but Marta's face showed pure terror. She had to act fast, but how? Her mind raced, since a direct confrontation might incite the wolves to launch a more intense attack. Almost trembling with uncertainty, Marta radioed her colleagues once more. One male wolf that may be hurt or cornered has been confirmed to be present close to the den. She hesitated, spitting off her approximate coordinates, because she was agitated and needed support. Location: she had never been this close to a situation in her years of research. Could result in disaster for the wolf and humans down in the clearing. Thor and the wounded young man advanced menacingly as the altercation intensified. The beta female allowed the intruder try to back away, but lost his balance, falling to the ground with a muffled thud. Luna was lifted from the ground by a harsh bark and the bristled hackles of all three wolves. Den's arrival was nodded as well, worried not only about the stranger, but also about the possibility of upsetting her still fragile pups made Marta's heart pound. The man on the ground appeared utterly terrified in her ears, and for good reason. Even one wolf may be dangerous, much alone 3 protecting baby horns. Typical advice: stand tall, don't flee, and keep your eyes on the ground. Insufficient in such a difficult situation, the man abruptly grabbed into his jacket. Fearing that he might be looking for a weapon, Mar stiffened, knowing that any hint of violence would lead to an attack. As the wolves hissed in unison, poised to attack, the darkest fears almost became a reality. However, the man instead produced a bright orange flare cannon, pointing it skyward with trembling hands before firing a burst of. The early morning sky was ripped with noxious smoke and searing light, and the wolves flinched at the unexpected flash and Thor flattened his ears in response to the deafening snap, and the beta female leaped away from her limp. The younger male backed off behind them in the chaos, which was more noticeable. As Marta watched, Luna screamed and pressed herself on her puppies, as the lighting created erratic shadows on the stony terrain inside. Thor and the other wolves stumbled towards the closest tree patch as the man stumbled to his feet. The flash confused him, and he appeared momentarily lost and afraid for his life. The intruder disappeared among the scattered footprints and blood droplets left by dense pines. Marta exhaled, hardly realizing that she had been holding her breath because of the danger, but had temporarily subsided. The man's presence had surely caused the peaback to become traumatized and could result in Serious repercussions for the puppies. Her hand was shaking so much that she was barely able to hold the camera. She attempted to recover her composure by reminding herself of the Wildlife Research Prime Directive. Observe and refrain from acting unless the animals are in immediate danger. In this instance, the wolves reassembled while the flare's brightness faded. Edge, Thor snorted, looking over the forest line as though he wasn't sure if he should finally pursue. He hobbled back towards Luna, who fiercely guarded the den's entrance. The two of them met eyes and, as they were having an unseen chat, Luna let out a short, breathy bark while asking Thor to concentrate on the puppies in the meantime. The second baby is special. Pack Law wriggled mindlessly in the dirt in that patent, which hasn't been tried yet. For a brief moment, Marta noticed a hint of acceptance in Thor's posture. Perhaps the alpha would give this odd pup a chance to live, but a persistent feeling of fear weighed on Marta. Any additional disturbance from people or other predators could fracture the delicate item. The true question was whether the pack will come together to celebrate this unusual birth, or if. A tense silence fell over the clearing after the pup, who disobeyed the norm, was rejected by them due to adversity. Flares afterglow. Heavy smoke plumes drifted through the sky, blending with the... Marta could just make out Thor's ragged breathing through the early mists. Alpha male protectively hovered close to the den after being hurt, though not right away. Was deadly enough to interfere with his mobility, the beta female gingery. The younger male wolf gazed at her as she hobbled behind him, her leg crooked at an awkward angle. For a long time, none of them moved as the tree line licked a wound on his back. Marta questioned whether the shock of the person's abrupt appearance, and more significantly, the explosive flash had successfully frozen their reflexes. Wolves typically shunned close contact with humans, especially when someone was acting unpredictably, but with no other option. The intruder approached their den dangerously, forcing a conflict. The wolves appeared uncertain on what to do next now that he was gone. Through her binoculars, Marta concentrated on Luna, the dominant female who was still hunched over with her muzzle pressed against the ground surrounding her body to protect the newborn puppies. Luna would sometimes. She turned her head to see how Thor was doing, her face tight in the feel Marta had. I have seen many maternal behaviors, but I have never seen one that is so strongly tinged with fear in a mother's everyday life. Here, a wolf may gently touch and cry to welcome her returning mate. Luna maintained a protective stance, as if anticipating more unrest at any moment from a stir in the surrounding brush. Generated a low growl of caution and a twitching of Thor's ears, but the source of it was discovered that the hubbub had attracted two subordinate females from a group. The beta female was almost instantly approached with obvious hesitation, her muzzles dropping in a display of submission. Pointed out to them that the pack's line of command was shaky at best, and that there was a lot of friction. Marta felt it in her bones, as the odd pup with swirling white patches, the smaller of the two newborns, released. Even from her hiding place, Marta could see the pup's cries were weak, like those of a newborn wolf, with a pitiful squeak. Survival depends on almost constant warmth and feeding, but Luna was hesitant to do so because of the stress of the recent occurrences. Calm because she was too agitated to adequately feed the puppies. Instead, she switched. Despite his wounds, Thor alternates between looking at them and directing tired glances at the injured pack mates. Approached Luna, sniffing at the puppies while his chest rumbled in a quiet growl. His nose trembled, particularly on the strangely colored one, in what Marta could only deduce as uncertainty. Marta paused to speak softly into her radio to inform her colleagues of the circumstances, which they verified. Rangers were now vigilant about potential park trespassing. Any unapproved hiker or possible poacher would be captured if discovered. She was unable to get rid of the persistent worry that the harm to the wolves' delicate sense of security had already been completed, but for a moment, she considered the notion of possibly stepping in, making sure the unique puppy had the care it required. But she was aware that going over that line would jeopardize the untamed essence of. If these wolves were to raise even one pup by hand, it would probably be doomed to a life in captivity or compromised. Reintroducing herself, Marta bit her lip to fight the need to do something that suddenly went beyond my observation. She noticed a stir in the clearing. The female subordinates had edged closer, possibly to see how in many wolf packs, additional females assist in nursing or comforting pups, foster a sense of community by caring for infants, but the tension emanating from Luna and the father, still brimming with energy, bared his teeth as Thor forced them to pause. One of the females moaned in remorse and retreated, cautioning them not to get too close. Luna was largely left to handle her after the other gave the pups a yearning look before turning away. Anxiety, her labor wounds, and her frail infant a few seconds later. As he tried to limp back into the clearing, the younger male wolf's anxious whine reverberated through the pines. However, Thor moved forward to stop him with a low, growling snarl. This was the harsh reality of a wounded pack member's life. Wolf runs the risk of altering pack dynamics when an alpha notices a wounded subordinate. In a moment of weakness, the younger male lowered his body with his tail virtually tucked in, making him a liability or a challenger. For a few painful seconds, it appeared as though they were crawling towards Thor in submission. Thor eventually opened his eyes to the possibility that the alpha would assault his own packmate. Glancing in the direction of the den site, as if to convey that Marta could, she could almost feel the relief coursing through her veins when the younger man was let to stay. She scowled as she noticed more blood on the man's hip, and less that wound. It was a harsh fact that clotted quickly could lead to infection or frailty. Without severe conditions, a veterinarian might treat a wild wolf, usually just by sedating it. Intervention was mostly limited to highly endangered populations or harm caused by humans, neither of which was undoubtedly true in this instance. Yet her empathy ached at Finally, the restrictions of her work at the den. Luna relaxed on her side, permitting the pups to feed. The typical gray pup latched right away, but the oddly furred one appeared to take longer to locate a suitable spot, and its squeaks, turning into irate sobs, Luna attempted to. Marta watched as the puppy struggled to engage, her heart throbbing at its vulnerability once more as she nudged it closer with her muzzle. Thor walked over and dipped his nose to examine the pup's markings. The alpha's breath caused the infant to smell. Patchy fur caused a little squeak, signaling that the alpha was in danger. The mother may be forced to comply with Thor's gaze if she rejects the puppy due to its unusual coloring or apparent weakness. Constricted, but a raucous core abruptly broke the surface before any violence could appear. Quiet, a raven swooped, maybe lured by the prospect of afterlife scraps. Above, its dark wings cutting through a slender ray of sunlight at the precise time of. Thor flung his head skyward, hissing at the brazen bird as the tension broke. Luna continued to lick it, possibly relieved that the alpha's focus had changed, and the pup gave a little yelp. The brief crisis was over, but Marta's slow sigh gave the impression that she had been holding her breath for hours. There was still a threat, so every wolf in the pack was on high alert, looking for the intruder who started this mayhem along the tree line, while the newborn pup is being marked by those odd, swirling patches held on to its mother, depending on Luna's protection and warmth. Nobody could predict whether it would be rejected or find long-term acceptance while standing motionless in the underbrush. As long as the puppy was alive, Marta could only speculate about what new difficulties may arise, but the true test would come with. In a harsh environment, time frequently runs out rapidly. The cold tension within the forest canopy was illuminated by the pale glimmer of Yellowstone's morning sun as it rose higher. But Wolfpack resisted, and Marta stayed hidden below her cloak. As she attempted to reconstruct the events following the intruder's unexpected arrival, the camera remained ready. As stark reminders of how quickly violence may break out, the younger male's limp and the bloodied shoulder stuck out. Luna's worried eyes shifted wearily between her lover and her injured pack mates, while the newborn pups stayed nestled beneath her. And the woodland beyond, Marta sensed a significant change taking place. The pack was reorganizing under a new emotional burden. Wolves can adjust fast, but a human shock. Everything changed when the intruder got so close to the lair. Thor, the dominant male, withdrew to a vantage position around 10. However, the muzzle of Luna's pinback ears was still streaked with his own blood. Every time the subordinate wolves moved, He appeared more cautious than before, even though he had earlier growled to reaffirm his dominance. Even as he took a few steps, his head erupted in teeth, clearly warning them to back off. Wasn't up for challenges, and the other members of the pack knew it. The two female subordinates who had been beaten by Thor's previous snarl and their low moan might have been part of their regular pattern. Contemplated getting closer to assist Luna in caring for her puppies, but the memories of that violent altercation lingered. One woman ventured to sniff the ground close to the den's entrance, possibly to see if there was any remaining afterbirth, or Luna growled more nervously in an attempt to get some assurance. Then animosity, causing the woman to retreat once more, leaving their typical cooperative dynamic in ruins. Marta attentively documented everything, zooming in on the infant as it was replaced by a whirling cloud of caution and mistrust. The swirl of white patches across the pup's primarily gray coat during karma moments may be a strain for pattern, celebration of a rare genetic quirk, or even a kind of wonder, but in these conditions, it seemed like a liability at the back of Marta's mind. But she was unable to idea that Thor had become dangerously interested in the pup's oddness. If tension increased further, that would be the first to suffer. She informed her radio. Pack, in a whisper, is on high alert. The dominant male is hurt and hostile, and the second pup is still. The wolves are still anxious, but the unusual marks are definitely unique and show no signs of additional human involvement. Marta hesitated when her colleague asked whether she needed help after hearing a crackle of static. The pack's uneasiness might worsen if the unidentified intruder returned or if more people showed up on the scene. If the condition of the injured wolves worsened, things might get out of hand. She chose to exercise care, asking merely that the squad wait in the clearing until Luna calmed down enough to. Her head remained up, and her body language remained vigilant as she let the pups to nurse once again. Every time there was a stir in the bush, the elder pup's ears turned, and its tail twitched with satisfaction. It squeaked sharper and more insistently as it watched the weaker pups while the smaller, patchy-furred pups battled. Caused Marta to struggle internally. The mother was trying her hardest, but the puppy would require steady surroundings and regular food to survive these crucial early days. Near the tree line, the younger male wolf's flank was still unstable at best. Every time he moved his weight off his damaged leg, he tried to lie down and rest, but it hurt. He was covered in fresh blood. The two submissive ladies grunted and scrunched their muzzles in agony. Perhaps moved by pity, he drifted over to him, but Thor didn't intervene this time. The younger male let the ladies sniff and groom his wound as he kept his focus on Luna in the den. Indication that pack unity was still present, but each look between them contained an unasked question. When an injured alpha and a leader face a leadership test, what happens next? The next few days would be crucial for the newly expanded pack. Any indication of weakness would be crucial, may lead to difficulties, and if Thor's violence continued, the pack's unity might deteriorate much more, the worst possible outcome. For the newborn pups, especially one that previously deviated from the norm, an internal rift might mean disaster. Martis. Thor stepped stiffly back towards Luna, and the alpha curled his lip in a half-snarl scanning, which made her heart sink. Luna, a mother's instinct to defend, growled softly at the pups. Second, Mar believed that if Thor perceived the abnormal pup as a danger or an oddity, he may strike out and possibly kill it. Thor just remained there, breathing raggedly, before sinking, even though he shouldn't have. In a reluctant display of stamina, a new drop of blood dripped down his shoulder onto his haunches. Luna gradually relaxed in the ground, even licking Thor's muzzle as a sign of. The alpha took the appeasement but continued to watch the other members of the pack suspiciously, while the youngster with the coat kept wriggling and eventually clung awkwardly and haphazardly to Luna's underside. As she repositioned her body to assist the youngster in feeding, the mother wolf offered a smooth whine. Mar's chest constricted upon witnessing that throughout the brief period of collaboration between Luna and Thor, the puppy discovered at least a high shift of wind transported the metallic tang of blood and adrenaline to provide a little reprieve from the anxiety of rejection. Mar's nostrils served as a reminder of how tenuous this peace actually was. Are tough, but a lot of things including injuries, stress, and fear could upset the one outlier, such as the oddly marked pup, could constitute a tipping point in the delicate equilibrium. Would Thor use his aggression in the next days to eradicate the pack's apparent weaknesses, band together around Luna, or would distant internal conflicts reappear? The passengers' ears turned in unison as Hawk cried out cut through the quiet, keeping them on edge every single minute. Disruption that set them off. Marta looked at her watch and saw that hours had gone by since the first altercation, although it felt the day was just a few minutes old, and she had a feeling that the night would bring much more uncertainty. An alpha female putting in extra hours to care for an odd pup and Predator's terrified subordinates did not bode well. Marta suppressed her nervousness and steadied her camera for a peaceful sleep, to keep watching for however long it took, clinging to the slender hope that the pack's innate ties would triumph over their anxieties. But each splintered branch and faraway bird call served as a reminder to her how little control she actually possessed. A wounded hum might be limping someplace as she moved across the clearing where Luna had taken refuge for her babies. Point Marta sensed the beginnings of exhaustion, but her adrenaline continued to rise at every small sound, such as a twig snapping. The wolf pack was startled by a far-off bird call, which highlighted how unsteady their balance had become. Yet while the first indication of problems appeared when the current threat appeared to have subsided and a new set of difficulties started to appear. A colleague researcher appeared when Mar's radio crackled with sudden urgency. Dessa whispered to Mar that we had found footprints leading away from the intruder's blood. Droplets along the trail are probably your coordinates. Mar's pulse accelerated as they moved further north into the restricted area. If the man was hurt, he may be in great danger because the region was notorious for its steep ravines and erratic thermal vents. If he panicked and attempted to defend himself from more wolves, the danger would be severe. Might unintentionally endanger the entire pack. Once more, Marta muttered. Does a range unit have a standby? Deshawn said that they are mobilizing, and we are also collecting up. Unauthorized weapon discharge near the northern boundary is the subject of odd conversation on the park's frequencies. Might have something to do with Mar's mind racing a weapon discharge, perhaps the flare gun. However, if there was more involved, such as a gun, the wolves found themselves in an even more vulnerable situation. Looked at Thor, who had been heavily armed since the fight and was still licking his injured shoulder. But, in order to stay informed, Marta questioned. He maintained a tight, tense stance whenever the wind rustled a branch. Dessa, please keep me updated on a regular basis. However, she cautioned everyone not to approach too closely. Desson acknowledged that additional human presence might make the pack feel more stressed, then concluded with a somber tone, shortly after which the second plotline emerged in a subtle but severe difficulty among the women themselves, beginning with the inferior females hesitantly circling back towards Luna, appearing more assured now that Thor had not immediately threatened to hurt the puppies under typical circumstances. With certain situations, these females might aid with feeding wolf pack or even grooming the newborns. They can exhibit amazing collective care for the children, but Luna's ongoing worry is exacerbated by Thor's. She became agitated at the approaching Betafoot fail and snapped at them, but there was no real threat. Wounded, the Beta slunk away with its tail tucked and yelled, revealing how everyone was tense, and Luna's response might have been a simple case of parental protectiveness, but the dynamics were changing in real time as the Beta female hobbled from her previous altercation. She sought solace close to the younger man who was obviously upset over being ejected when she was merely attempting to assist. Physically injured himself, but from Mar's perspective, she could see a faint alliance developing into a shared bond resulting from recent. Such relationships frequently lead to problems in wolf packs since they cause embarrassment and pain. Power plays can be sparked by volatile behavior and multiple injuries, but a powerful alpha pair usually strengthens group unity. If both a beta female and a subordinate male harbor feelings of injustice, they may subtly challenge the alpha's authority. These hinted to a smoldering battle that could break out at any time, making it especially risky for V-able new pups in the interim. The second pup, the one with the peculiar markings, kept up its battle with the tiny thing it had acquired. Some vigor after nursing, but its mismatched fur-drew squeaks were still weaker than its siblings. The other wolf's sporadic looks, which seldom lasted long but brought attention to its differences, alarmed Marta. That the pup's individuality might become the target of attack if pack tensions increased further. When Scars or the alpha thought that stability was in jeopardy, the most peculiar pup could be the first to be sacrificed. Marta forced herself to stay vigilant despite her sleepy eyes, and the best she could do was collect information carefully, recording the duration of every conversation and taking notes on. The wolves indicated the pup's feeding times by changing their body language. Was the type of intense fieldwork that might provide remarkable understanding of wolf behavior. But at what price? She returned her focus to Thor, who was already standing, after hearing several low growls from the creatures. The younger man's subordinates' ears were flattened, their gaze darted sideways, and their posture indicated. It's possible that the younger wolf is pushing boundaries by getting closer to Luna and the pups than Thor thought. Acceptable in a single, strong action. Thor swung his teeth forward, snapping shyly. The tension in the pack increased as the younger male retreated, limping backward with a harsh yelp out of the subordinate's muzzle. A gust of wind carrying a new, disturbing smell, the subtle tang of smoke, upped the ante in the middle of this friction. Could the intruder have ignited a fire, or was it more caustic than the flare residue? The wolves raised their heads and flared their nostrils, causing another disturbance in the untamed depths of the park. Thor let, halfway examining the perimeter security, letting out a deep growl and turning towards the far-off horizon. Luna rose. Marta felt her blood run cold like a fire as her instincts spiked once more. If even a little brush fire started, the pack could have to leave the newborn puppies behind and go. Progress too quickly. Despite its beauty, Yellowstone's environment was vulnerable to rapidly spreading fires due to recent drought. Conditions were set up for disaster in some places, and if that happened, the 2-day-old puppies wouldn't have a chance. Without prolonged mobility or established pack collaboration, her IO crackled once more, whispering Dessa's words. A tiny patch of smoke was observed by Marta rangers around 2 miles north of your location. The same individual with the flare pistol might be on their way, or it might be a campfire gone out of control. Marta looked down the slope and saw that wolves would move, but the pack wouldn't. Simply put, newborn pups restrict a mother's ability to go far or quickly, and with. The adults would be less likely to suddenly change territory if they had several injuries. They're still in the den. Indication of movement, she answered. I doubt they'll leave the pups unless there's an immediate threat. Keep me informed, Ass. With several problems pressing on her, a possible fire, an injured alpha, and more, she interrupted the broadcast. Potential conflict over authority in the pack and that vulnerable, strangely marked puppy whose existence depended on preserving the. Mar realized that she was an unwilling participant in a complex system rather than just an observer in uncertain unity. Web of tension where each choice she makes or doesn't make could tip the balances. She steadied her attention on the wolves and each new storyline by taking long breaths. Difficult for them to survive, but despite the chaos, life had managed to. For the time being, Luna's puppies, including the odd one, clung tenaciously to life. The pack hadn't betrayed them, at least, but the night would present new difficulties, and as Marta pointed out, she believed that the true trial for Luna, Thor, and their peculiar pup was just getting started as dusk approached because to the thickening shadows. Crawled across the rocky landscape of Yellowstone, Marta sensed a gradual but noticeable dip in temperature as the shadows became longer, brought a greater sense of unease to the wolf pack, and Luna remained vigilant and held her puppies close, licking the odd trademarked one every now and then to soothe its restless squeaks. Mother wolf would frequently glance towards the dense pine canopy where smoke could be seen in the distance. Thor, in the meantime, paced the perimeter of the den as the invisible threat descended over them all, throwing a shadowy uncertainty over it. He tried his hardest to hide the anguish coming from his injured shoulder in the clearing, but Marta could see the tiny hiccup in his gait. The blood-matted fur on his flank glistened every time the alpha turned towards the waning sunshine. He assumed a hard stance of authority and exhaustion, as if any intruder, whether a man or a beast, would set the youngest male of the pack had attempted to rest by tucking, but the simmering tension had escalated into a full-fledged battle in the previous hour. The subservient woman who had hobbled before nestled next to him, intermittently grooming, under a wind-fallen spruce. Despite their quiet exchanges, there was a clear sense of unity despite the injury to his hip. They lowered their heads obediently if Thor or Luna looked in their direction, but Marta was unable to stop them, yet saw that every tiny alliance and body language nuance was pointing to a possible break-in. She moved her rigid legs in the P's hierarchy, being cautious not to ruffle the bushes. A single slip-up could attract attention around her, and the pack was unable to deal with unexpected. Her radio crackled. She hastily turned down the level before hitting the transmit button because Dessa's voice was filled with. Mar Rangers said the minor fire is under control quickly, although they discovered footprints circling back towards the southern trails. We're not sure if this indicates the intruders are doubling back. Mark's twisted stomach might be going directly to the den if he's armed. Once more, she said, the wolves might sense if he feels cornered or desperate. Dessa stopped, and they're telling you to leave the area until the danger is. Neutralized, Marta took a deep breath and stared at Luna and the puppies. Giving up her vantage point could cause her to miss important changes, such as when the pack rejects or harms the odd puppy. I know the danger, she whispered softly, but I must maintain, keeping an eye out, and if things get out of hand, I'll pull back. Another hiss of static before Dessa agrees to replicate it. Marta put the radio away and went back to watching the sun's last rays, promising to update us as soon as they had more intelligence. In the cool twilight, the wolves slid behind a ridge and left the clearing, becoming the gathering darkness. The rare reflection of EY shine interspersed with silhouettes. With his ears turning at the slightest sound, Thor smelt the air and remained on high alert, clearly still shaken by what had happened that day, and perhaps detecting the same smoky odor that Marta had detected. The pack had gradually fallen into a nocturnal rhythm earlier, although it was far from common or normal situations. Some members may go on a little search at twilight, but the group seemed conflicted on whether to maintain. Despite the stress of defending their delicate den and defending their territory, hunger would eventually become apparent. Wolves may only miss a certain number of hunts before stress levels worsen, thus weakening pack unity. Mar's attention shifted to when it discovered a gap. The more robust gray pup wriggled with assurance between Luna's front paws and nursed. Frequently, the smaller, patchy-furred sister had to make do with whatever room was left, its weak squeaks highlighting its. If Luna got too nervous or restless to keep them safe, tonight's coldness would be their first test against the cold. Heated, they may quickly become weaker, and then there was a slight change in the clearing. Rose, the subordinate female, left her companion's side and cautiously approached the den, pausing at the muzzle. Lowered her body in a way that seemed more like a request than an act of aggression or fear. Luna didn't snarl or snap this time. Maybe she was just too tired. Nervousness. Or perhaps she saw the importance of an assistant. The woman drew nearer. Thor's jaw split as he turned his head abruptly until she was within a yard of the puppies. However, Luna's quiet groan and halting complaint, which sounded more tired than hostile, were sufficient to. The subservient female gradually sunk onto her stomach to stop Thor's aggression and, after a stressful moment, Luna started to make gentle whining sounds as a sign of submission. Permitted to lick the bigger pup's face, the patchwork pup wriggled apprehensively, then uttered a slight squeak when the female nuzzled it again, and Marta exhaled a tiny sigh of relief. In many wolf groups, the first indication of the pack's customary cooperative character is returning, with several females sharing the duties of providing warmth and grooming to babies. If this dynamic took root, it might increase the little pup's chances of surviving and possibly even ease some of the stress, but Martin was certain that it could. Can make Thor envious or suspicious, particularly if the younger woman turned bolder or if after a few moments of silent cooperation, the man joined in, as expected. When a male began to limp towards the den, the female turned to look at him and waved her tail a little, but Thor became enraged, advancing with a menacing growl that stopped the younger man in his tracks. Although the subordinate's ears paused and flattened in deference, Marta noticed Day. His posture showed a hint of hostility. He was worn out, injured, and clearly. The sky grew darker as the Alpha's unwavering attention to detail annoyed me. A group of stars overhead started to blink awake in the growing darkness. Marta sensed the silhouettes of wolves blending into black shapes, their positions only revealed by the slightest flash of eyes. Perhaps the sound of a piercing snap echoing across the woodland made my heart race. Perhaps it was an elk or a lone bison, but the sound of a limb breaking beneath the ground was enough to make Thor bare his teeth in a primordial manner. Luna wrenched her head up, straining her ears as the snarl echoed from his chest. The subordinate female curled protectively around the pups, freezing close to their tail at. At that point, everyone was betting on either a big animal or, worse, the same person. The pack's response to the intruder on the clearing might be disastrous, leaving the pups revealed if a full-scale altercation broke out. Even while there was little danger, the tension between the adult wolves could suddenly attack, and Marta's grip on her camera tightened as a knot of fear twisted in her gut. Strained her own ears to listen, but the woodland provided no further hints, just the sound of leaves rustling in the wind, yet the thread of conflict hung over it like a thunderhead. Would the pack be able to stay together long enough to safeguard their babies, especially the one who is so vividly? Was Marta any different from the others? Or was this the calm before a storm that would break their brittle acceptance? Responses. All she could do was keep her guard up, her nerves eroding at the corner's ass. Over Yellowstone's ancient pines, the moon rose, and darkness fell with a sense of approaching crisis becoming closer. Completely over Yellowstone, turning the woods into a dark labyrinth as she waxes. Pale ribbons of light streamed through the pine's mars as the moon hung low in the sky. As she peered to discern objects moving in the gloom that the wolf pack had taken up residence in, her heart pounded in her ears. Thor was always on guard, keeping a restless hush as each member stood ready for whatever could come out of the blackness. Patrol of the den. Despite the fact that he was now more obviously limping, the Alpha refused to let his guard down whenever Luna lay coiled around him, his nostrils flashing as if he was sniffing the air for any threat. Pups are tense and rigid, yet they are determined to keep the inferior female warm. Reluctantly agreed after her little nursing gesture remained near Luna, while the younger man lingered at. With a hint of defiance emanating from her vantage point, Marta's head was low and flicking towards Thor. She picked up a slight change in the environment that replaced the pack's previous fear of human harm from the outside. As the number of fires and/or larger predators continued to rise, but an extra internal conflict exacerbated Thor's wounds, and a possible power struggle with the newborn pups present was exposed by the subordinate mal's annoyance. The social balance was more precarious than ever, especially for someone so unusual. A crackle on Mar's radio almost made her. Meanwhile, she gradually reduced the volume until Mardessa's voice could hardly be heard. Came across as anxious but in control, and the Rangers believe the intruder is carrying more than just a flare pistol. Reported seeing a man with a tiny gun. It's unclear if he's using it for self-defense or hunting, but Mar's stomach lurched a little, most likely in the southern sector close to your coordinates. Gun in these woods, close to a wolf lair, which is a surefire way to. She said, disaster understood. Any indication he's approaching the den site is not confirmed. Dessa answered, but since he's moving erratically, he might accidentally come upon the. When wolves exhaled, Mar's trembling gaze was fixed on Thor's shadowy figure. The struggle may turn deadly if the Alpha detected a human threat once more, especially one that was armed. Putting the oddly marked pup aside, her heart tightened at the image of a scared pack or a hasty flight after a gunshot. Low thunder rumbled in the distance, causing a profound tremor that may seal its doom. The wind picked up, rustling branches above, which appeared to be a sign of an impending storm. When Thor raised his skyward muzzle, it twitched in response to the shifting air currents, which are how wolves usually detect impending weather. Violent storms frequently add another level of chaos, with lightning and thunder scattering wildlife and shifting predators and prey. Motions and increased tension in a susceptible pack soon after the thunder's echo subsided rose. A slight rustle came from the other side of the clearing, followed by a muted curse. Marta swept her, stiffening in a way that was distinctly human. Binoculars through the shadows, her heart pounding through a leaf gap, she saw a dark-clad figure stumble over roots. It had to be the same intruder, or at least someone's. The group went rigid in unison, ears inclined towards the sound, equally lost. Before Marta could comprehend the situation completely, a quick lightning strike illuminated the area. Stark and Vivid stood there, their teeth gleaming white, while Luna's tense body curled about her puppies, and a guy with what appeared to be a short-barreled weapon clutched her terrified gaze. A younger male wolf snarled in a low, dangerous manner, similar to a warning snarl that had come before the altercation that afternoon, and Mara's stomach twisted in fear as she hit the broadcast button on her radio. I can see that the intruder is holding a weapon with shaking fingers. Dessa's response was in clipped tones, and it was static crackling. The Rangers are getting closer, but you must be careful in case there are gunshots. She stopped him before he could finish. I'm not abandoning them in the clearing, she said in a strained whisper. Apparently confused by the sudden lightning, the man staggered forward as Thor and the beta female advanced in A. The younger male circled widely, cutting off the tight predatory formation. Potential escape route for intruders. Luna stayed near the den, her body acting as a living shield for the puppies, the subordinate. Although they were fighting one another, the entire pack was hurt and anxious as the female stood by her side with her hackles rising. A bright flash illuminated the scene once more, followed almost immediately by an armed man. When the ground shook with a thunderclap, the man became frightened, and Marta saw him fumbling with his gun, which wolves usually use. Consider abrupt movements to be aggressive, and in fact, Thor was crouching low, poised to leap, and Mara's pulse almost stopped. When a guy fired his gun, the bullet may hit a wolf, ricochet, or perhaps send the whole pack into a panic. As she watched the intruder lift the barrel, her voice stuck in her throat, but the man lost his balance in his rush. The weapon clattered to the ground as it went backward on a slippery patch of pine needles, releasing a strangled yelp. The younger male wolf quickly attacked and snapped its jaws close to the man's leg. As he attempted to get back, a frantic yell ripped through the night, and for a single, gasping second, Marta was. Thor leapt forward in a stunning turn, despite being aware that a deadly attack was about to occur. With a strong body smash, Marta stopped the younger male's attack. It appeared nasty, with fur flying and snarling. Thor compelled the alpha to stop a kill despite his own wounds after realizing. Putting the younger wolf aside, Marta stood over him in a position that shouted authority. Saw in shock as the subordinate, despite being agitated by adrenaline, instantly stung his neck in. Surrender. The man took use of the opportunity to rush back and grab his gun. As if considering whether to shoot, eyes flickered to the den and then back to the group before another lightning strike. Luna's pups cried when the light shone on the wolves' gleaming teeth and untamed eyes below them. Perhaps the intruder caught a sight of the smaller one, whose distinctive coat now shone in the lightning's brightness. Perhaps white on gray, or perhaps he just realized that firing would cause a lot of problems regardless of the reason for choosing to flee rather than fight. He turned and ran towards the forest line, staggering frantically into the. Thor barked angrily in the foliage, but he didn't go after the other wolves. Also remained close to the den, unsure of whether to further defend their area, or to intensify their efforts to save the hearts of their alpha female and newborns. Marta smashed into her ribs as she became aware that the alpha male had stopped a deadly conflict with his own subordinate to save the pack's future in spite of the persistent danger of a returning shooter, a damaged alpha, and a contentious structure the wolves formerly avoided disaster once more by the narrowest of margins. Yet the strain was still there. In that moment of shaking stillness, Marta could feel the thunderheads rumbling overhead and the strong smell of rain on the breeze. Realized that a total collapse of pack unity or the last encounter with this intruder might only be a. She prepared herself for whatever the impending storm would bring as the night sky burst into silver after the lightning strike. Rain started to fall sharply as a lightning strike tore over the horizon, followed by thunder that shook the pines. Infrequent explosions from her concealed vantage point caused Marta to brush droplets from her. With her eyebrows barely daring to blink, she knew with all her being that this was the group had just been spared a fatal altercation at the most crucial moment yet. Yet the air was still crackling with lingering hostility and terror, and now nature had chosen to intensify the conflict with storm. Rain was on his chest, and Thor stayed close to the middle of the clearing, panting raggedly, his fur wet and matted with blood. Each breath was flavored with a growl as they rose and sank in brief, shallow intervals. He had cowed a few paces away, muzzle to the ground, a subordinate male he had violently confined in a position of. A whirl of lightning highlighted the two wolves frozen in a state of nervous resignation. Luna stood in the shadows, a tableau of tension and strife. Behind her, the inferior female wolf, to the den, putting her body protectively against her babies, kept an attentive and composed posture, gaze darting between Thor and the younger man, as though anticipating another eruption. The thunder roared so loudly, and another flash tore through the sky that the smaller dog let out a scared cry even at. From a distance, Marta could see the mother's ears flatten as the pup's patchy coat trembled with every frightened squeak. She licked both PS quickly in an attempt to calm them, her own heartbeat surely thumping with the awareness. Mar crept farther behind the fir tree, stand to protect herself, knowing that the intruder was still somewhere out there. She resisted the impulse to go in and protect the pups from the wet or provide some assistance because of the weather. To Thor's open shoulder wound, but she was confined by her training to one reality. Since direct meddling would do more harm than good, she sighed shakily and adjusted the focus on her camera. Once more, it was crucial to continue recording this extraordinary situation. Every second provided priceless information about how wolves react under severe stress, human dangers, and internal power struggles. Even the existence of an unusual puppy, a glimmer of movement in the clearing, caught her attention, and the inferior male had started, favoring his damaged hip as he limped towards a tree line, possibly in search of. Thor gave a low rumble, possibly in an attempt to disassociate himself from the AL's irascible temper, but didn't give chase obvious fatigue. The alpha appeared more interested in protecting the den than punishing a fleeing subordinate. The pack's breathing was once audible as the storm-induced rain continued to beat down on the earth. Luna crouched closer to the den entrance as the silence was overtaken by the rain, attempting to keep the pups dry, particularly the smallest one who appeared to shudder with each thunderclap. This time, Luna let the ordinate female to approach, presumably in an attempt to help. But the alpha female's muscles remained tense, and Mar's radio crackled faintly over the thunder. Dessa's voice hissed as she pushed it to her ear. "Marta, do you read?" She murmured. "Static reading you. Storms are becoming worse." The Rangers have. Losing sight of the intruder, Dessa stated that they are afraid he has either found refuge or is wandering around the park. Marta swallowed hard and realized that he might turn around to locate softer ground, perhaps close to where you are, keeping position until it gets too dangerous. A wind blast shattered across the clearing, causing the pine needles to spin and break loose. The younger male wolf froze in shock and began to hobble after scattering leaves in all directions. Thor's ears pricked and locked upon his movement as he moved deeper into the shadows. Yet he did nothing except snarl half-heartedly, and there was obvious proof that the alpha's breath rattled in his throat. That exhaustion was starting to set in. Any leader in the outdoors needs to balance being assertive with. Since the start of the day, self-preservation and Thor had been juggling each other on thin ice, and by this point, deep puddles were starting to appear. Once more, Luna tried to keep the puppies on the highest area of ground at the den's entrance by nudging them. Eyes strayed to the swirl-furred puppy, who appeared even smaller beneath the raindrops. Its larger, stronger sister clung to Luna's abdomen, eyes tightly closed, and the strange pup tried to move closer, but was pushed away as its body curled tightly. In an attempt to bring both pups to her side, the mother reacted with a worried whine, and the patchy pup gave that heartbreaking sight of a pathetic cry, helplessly thrashing on the slick earth. Almost had Marta stand up because she wanted to save the puppy and lift it out of the rising water, but any human Any sudden movement in the area could cause a pack to completely forsake the pup due to its scent. Deadly encounter with Thor. She made herself stop crying. The harsh trade-offs that come with wildlife research were like a blinding bolt of lightning, pricking at her eyes. Uncomfortably close to the rattling martyr's teeth in the next thunderclap, the Thor whirled around, snapping in bewilderment, as the submissive female yelled in terror. When the light faded, Marta saw something new, a shallow stream of water, as though the storm itself were an enemy, was leaking into the den where Luna had selected if the rain persisted. The younger guy reappeared, lured back by the possibility that the area that had been protected by rocks and roots could suddenly flood. Despite his prior retreat, the group's worried calls revealed some deep-rooted loyalty. As the storm raged, the submissive female turned to him and begged him to join the others. While seeking cooperation or comfort, but Thor's response was immediate and vicious, a snarling guttural that. The younger man humbled himself in submission as it passed through the clearing like a physical shockwave. A glimmer of annoyance appeared in Marta's eyes as he saw an animal trapped by nature and an overbearing alpha 4. The entire pack remained in standoff for several heartbeats, with rain dripping off their matted coats and flashing their fangs and. Thor finally paid heed to Roar's head and moved away from the younger man who was changing. The subordinate used his focus on Luna and the den as a brief relief, squeezing sideways to avoid range, but Marta could see from the set of his shoulders that his wounded pride was smoldering and being restrained only by the. In an instant, the patchwork puppy moaned harder as it struggled to keep its small muzzle above the water that was collecting, moved clumsily to shield it, but fear and tiredness caused her breath to come in ragged trousers. If the den flooded or there was a storm, her birth wounds would still be sore. Scared the group into moving that odd puppy, who might not make it through the night. As she looked towards the woodland half and filmed the image with shaky hands, a chill ran down Mar's spine. Anticipating to witness the intruder reappear with his weapon between the unresolved human menace and the raging storm. Every minute felt like a countdown to the cracks in the pack doom, which hung like a live wire. This delicate balance would be tipped over the brink by one crisis too many, and the rain grew louder as it drummed against the rivulets into tiny streams on the forest floor with such fury that Marta found it difficult to keep her camera lens dry, wiping it with a spare handkerchief every few seconds. The grim situation was revealed by darkness interspersed with violent lightning strikes. Circumstance and confusing photos, each flash of white light shifted across. The river glinting steadily closer to the wolves' strained silhouettes and the churned dirt beneath their claws. Near Luna, Thor stayed motionless like a stone, his ears turning every time. When thunder struck, a fresh, diluted stream of blood appeared to be dripping down his leg from the incision on his shoulder. Resolute to protect the den, but fatigue made his eyes less intense as he cleared the subordinate. The guy lingered on the periphery, caught between allegiance and bitterness. The woman who had been caring for him stayed on the sidelines and cast an uneasy glance at Luna, the alpha. The female's top goal was clear. She protected her nervous pups from the rising by keeping them snuggled against her abdomen. In particular, the swirl-furred pup's cries seemed to be rising as the water seemed to fade. Softer beneath the relentless storm, a lightning strike briefly lit up the area, allowing Marta to capture her. She gasped as she noticed that the little area of ground beneath Luna was covered in muck. When water dragged around her babies, the mother wolf made a last-ditch effort to sweep earth away from the pups, maintain them on higher ground, but her efforts in the den were undone by every new downpour. Flooded completely, Luna could have to relocate the puppies, a task that required some peace and quiet and a safe new home. Mar's radio crackled again as the storm provided neither location at the moment. Poor Mardishan's voice was almost overpowered by the downpour, yet it broke through the strain. Rangers are pursuing the intruder, and they are warning all staff to get ready for possible evacuation in the event of bad weather. As things became worse, she looked back at the den evacuation, which may have been the human protocol. However, the wolves lacked such a direction, so they would have to rely solely on instinct if the storm continued to threaten them. When there is a lot of strain, instincts may flare up and cause pandemonium. I advise if it becomes too dangerous, stand by. Thunder rolled again, she whispered. Marta felt the ground tremble beneath her boots as the pine branches above her shook, her stomach turning with each roar of the storm. She focused on the subordinate woman who had once again gotten closer to Luna. After a tense moment, the woman moaned softly and pressed her nose into Luna's neck fur, seemingly to provide comfort or support. Luna hesitated, but she kept her eyes fixed on the whirling wall. This small display of solidarity suggested the cooperative character that wolf packs may display even in times of chaos if allowed a chance. But as soon as the younger man tried to approach, possibly with the intention of helping, the delicate moment broke. Perhaps all he needed was the warmth of the pack, but Thor would not allow it. So the alpha charged forward with a lightning flashed once more, capturing the explosive motion as the snarl snapped his jaws only inches from the younger male's snout. Jaws with their fangs apart, water drops frozen in midair, and a sharp detail. The tension in the pack tightened as a subordinate man yelled and staggered back, barely avoiding a second blow. Coiled spring almost unrolled into full-fledged violence, but Luna's abrupt bark, which wasn't exactly a call for calm, stopped Thor from launching the attack. However, a desperate mother demands that you stay near and defend the pups. Don't spend valuable energy on a battle, whether due to fatigue or a lack of respect for Thor. Obeyed the warning by giving the younger man a deadly gaze before grudgingly going back to Luna's side. Mara's heart again thudded as the subordinate male slunk back into the darkness, his tail coiled tightly against his belly. Any sense of pack cohesion would be undermined by outbursts, and a single slip-up could turn the younger male on Thor or just vanishing into the wilderness, making the pack even less strong. Taking her eyes off the puppies, Marta saw the swirl fur one in the flooded den. Luna coughing and squirming weakly, attempted to move in a different way to get the baby out of the mare, but the rising water made everything more difficult. The puppy made weak squeaks and ran the risk of ingesting filthy water whenever it opened its lips. Marta's throat constricted, and if nothing changed quickly, the puppy wouldn't reach sunrise. She made an effort to relax by concentrating on the information she was gathering and the story that was playing out in front of. It seemed less like a straightforward field observation and more like a slow-motion tragedy. The internal cracks caused by Alpha M's damage, the relentless storm, and a young wolf could be doomed by the impending arrival of intruders, or any one of these elements alone could create a gauntlet that put the pack's strength to the strain, and then the rain slackened and tapered off into a heavy drizzle. Thunder rumbled again, but it appeared to move away a little as the main bulk of the storm moved in. Shifted eastward, the water still glistened in the clearing, but at least the deluge stopped beating the wolves. Marta took a silent sigh of relief in the hopes that the pack will be able to regroup during this lull and possibly move to higher ground or locate a safer nook for the puppies, as though Luna had turned her muzzle skyward on cue. Glancing between Thor and the subordinate female, she sniffed the air and released a gentle sequence of whines. Thor flicked his ears indecisively, realizing that Mother required assistance moving the puppies if they were to survive the night. Through his position, would he continue to protect the area or help his partner move these defenseless lives to safety? The younger man observed Marta's muscles from the periphery. Couldn't predict if he would follow, disagree, or leave them completely. The subordinate woman offered an encouraging whimper, stepped forward as if offering to assist in carrying a puppy. It was a delicate balancing act in a healthy pack. In this damaged, mistrustful community, shifting a den is a meticulously planned dance in which each member plays a part. More of a high-stakes wager. Marta felt the faint echo of thunder telling them all that the storm may turn around again. If the wolves cooperated, she would not want to lose a moment of this crucial moment. Thus she felt her pulse in her temples. Youngster might make it through, but if Thor struck again or the intruder showed up at this crucial time, the fragile unity would break, dooming not only the unusual baby, but also the entire pack as the lightning flared along. Tableau Luna's taut figure hunkered protectively over the far-off ridgeline, showing the wolves in a fleeting ghostly. The younger male's stooped stance at the edge of the clearing and the pup's proud, tired silhouettes. The female subordinate stood between them, poised as though she were the only one who could bridge the gap that threatened to rip the. Luna made the initial move after the rain had subsided to a constant drizzle. She cautiously raised the gray puppy by scruff as she moved towards relocation, pushing the wet ground aside to locate a firmer. With a short squeal of protest, the swirl-furred pup temporarily left. Thor stood watch by himself in the muddy hollow, his head turning to survey the gloom. Despite not having specifically accepted Luna's intentions, he had looked for any indication of danger. His posture conveyed his understanding that, despite his mate's shaky grip over the pack, he would not desert him. The subordinate female approached the second pup with hesitation. Would Luna allow her to do so at this crucial moment? Manage the oddly marked baby, or would long-standing tensions resurface? Luna flashed. She gave a brief warning snarl with her teeth, but the alpha let out. A flood of relief passed over me as I let out a low groan, an almost hesitant indication of consent. Mar understood that although the mother would permit cooperation, she was still the submissive. Thor snarled and stepped violently as the female leaned to pick up the swirl-furred pup. Mar's heart was gripped hard in servitude when the smaller wolf froze its ears. Thudded. The pup was condemned to be left alone if Thor persisted in refusing assistance. Couldn't securely transport both babies over slick ground, particularly if they needed to go more than a few yards. As Thor advanced, teeth bared, the darkest fears almost came to a head, but finally. Second, Luna growled back at her mate, a mother with her own body, with a gleam of rage in her eyes. It was a risk to discreetly challenge the alpha. However, it was successful. Thor lowered his muzzle and snorted as his ears flickered in surprise, grudgingly acknowledging that Luna required help from a subordinate. The female sprang forward, cradling the swirl-furred pup against the side of her jaws as she took it in her mouth. With unexpected grace, Marta gently released this delicate dance of. After a compromise gave the odd pup another shot, the dangerous chore of locating higher ground arrived. The area had turned into a mudslide, and trees with standing water stood like sentinels surrounded them, their roots slippery and dangerous beneath Luna's feet. Thor initially moved carefully through the viscous sludge, continuing to favor his. The submissive female followed closely behind, carrying the load despite having a damaged shoulder, but moving forward with gloomy resolve. The younger male furred pup stayed at the back, limping, but he was forced to stay with the pack rather than risk being alone. Survival in an enemy-infested park beyond every darkness. Mar is equally wary, kept a safe distance from them, moving parallel to them, with each step carefully chosen to prevent twigs from breaking. Line of sight. If they came across another threat, this might be the pack's last stand. The radio at her hip stayed. Silence provided little consolation because it might indicate that the Rangers were still pursuing the intruder somewhere in. After walking a dozen yards, the wolves stopped under a tree while the storm battered the forest. Luna put her gray pup down, panting, under a tall spruce tree whose thick branches diverted most of the drizzle. The effort as the submissive female delicately placed the infant with swirl fur on a cushion made of moist needles. Both pups. Luna coiled up, her muled legs flapping, confused by the sudden change. The beta female hovered around them, providing warmth, uncertain if she should stay or surrender to the mother's protected space. Thor sniffed the air, his lips silently snarling back at each. Amidst the rustle in the bushes, the younger male remained close to the perimeter, acting as a temporary outer guard. Even though he was injured and hobbling, he kept his ears alert in case the group's vulnerable members were in danger. Unity resembled a sapling's slender trunk bending under the wind. Any additional strain could cause it to split in two. Marty used her binoculars to monitor every movement while crouching behind a mossy wood. The fear wolves in Yellowstone were a factor in her relief that the wolves were moving the pups. Though rarely under circumstances this dangerous, I'm used to severe weather and difficult terrain. Clearly different, the youngster was in the middle of its brief existence, debating whether the group could stay together for a short while longer. A dim light on the horizon indicated that. Wolves are usually most active at nightfall, and dawn was just a few hours away. However, instead of hunting, this pack had spent its prime hours fending off danger, so they would soon be hungry. The subordinate wolves might split off to look for food if the tension increased, or if they believed the alpha was too hurt or unsteady to lead a proper hunt. They would question Thor's leadership. Mar's stomach twisted at the idea that the newborn pups would most likely be doomed by a coup within the pack, but then a slight crack came from. The younger male gave a low warning growl farther into the trees, and Thor's. Luna instantly flattened herself over the pup's breath in response to Rose's hackles. Mar's heart accelerated in panic. Was it merely a branch falling beneath the... Seconds later, the gloom lifted due to the weight of the rain or the reappearance of the intruder. Enough to show a shadowy figure moving, and Marta took a deep breath before realizing. A single cow elk was walking close to the edge of the clearing, most likely attracted by a mineral lick that caused the elk's ears to freeze, turning abruptly in fear when several wolves are spotted and smelt, which is customary. A group would plan a hunt, but these wolves were worn out and protecting babies in a rear on a previous. The elk threw its head and fled with its hooves as they prepared for battle. In normal circumstances, the pack might have after it, thankful for the opportunity, but instead it disappeared into the bushes, splattering mud. Tonight at fresh prey, they released it without pursuing any of the wolves, distracted by wounds and defending the den to prevent more strife. Marta, realizing that neglecting a possible meal was a serious sign of how bad things had gotten for them. Luna tried to nurse the puppies once more, but the screams of the wavy newborn seemed to be muffled. As the subordinate female hovered close to Thor, breathing heavily maintained, she licked it persistently, urging it to eat. A mobile watch that searches the night for potential or actual dangers in just 24 hours after a violent altercation with a human invader had upended their universe. ICS is now facing dawn with a flood that is causing a storm in breaking pack policy. Shattered sense of solidarity, each moment a tense respite from catastrophe. Marta couldn't take her eyes off of the conflict, storms, and packs she filmed. Rivalries in the past, but she had never seen a newborn pup struggle to survive in such unrelenting hardship. And one fact struck her throughout it all. The Swirl Fair pup was the catalyst. Live exception that questioned the pack's deep-rooted instincts about whether defying convention would result in a tragedy. A cold, clammy dawn remained agonizingly unknown. Whether it would be the end of an extraordinary triumph broke over Yellowstone, leaving behind a translucent layer of fog as the storm clouds drifted eastward. The huddled wolves beneath the expansive spruce seemed more like silent specters. Mar's muscles ached from hours of crouching, but she was still a proud pack, could not afford to unwind, and the swirl-furred pup's precarious fate hung in the balance. And from her vantage point, she observed that every second appeared to present a fresh challenge to the pack's unity. Thor stumbled as he walked through the soaking brush. The rain had not washed his wound. He occasionally moved as if to circle the den after washing away some of the blood, but his exhaustion eventually overcame him, and he would fall onto his instincts to be alert close to the younger, gingerly tested male. Despite an uncomfortable ceasefire, his damaged leg ears swiveled each time he looked up at the alpha. A quick disturbance might turn it into hostility. Luna tried to milk the puppies once more, her own fatigue showing in. She moved the swell third pup, who had been beaten by the cold, slowly and deliberately. Tiredly whimpered, causing its mother to lick it anxiously every time the pup took a hard breath. Highlighted how vulnerable the inferior female's position was. Without coordination, they periodically hovered and licked the newborn's fur to increase circulation, but these little acts alone might not be sufficient to stop hypothermia. Marta mentally listed all the potential outcomes if the pack chose to move the pups again, hoping that drier ground and some protection from the biting might enhance their chances. Wind, but keeping moving also cost the mother valuable energy that her need to provide adequate milk, and the swirl for pup might also receive a label if the alpha's hostility returned. Weak or too dissimilar to be a hindrance to the pack's ability to survive, her radio shattered the silence once more, this time with a gentler. DESA Rangers searched a quarter-mile radius around Cracklemar, but they found no evidence of the. Marta's eyes flashed as the phrase, armed intruder, appeared, but they believe he has now escaped outside the park's perimeter. She murmured that she was still being cautious, looking around for any. Deshawn responded, "Human shape, the packs are still uneasy, but at least they aren't in immediate danger. With the hope that the intruder may have left, let's hope that the morning brings calmer conditions everywhere." Returned her whole focus to the wolves, who now have to make the first major decision of the day, whether to reinforce the den or obtain food. Usually, the mother would tend to the babies while the alpha male and a few subordinates hunted, but Thor's injuries, even those conventional roles, were in disarray due to the ongoing internal conflict. With a hesitant look at Luna, the subordinate female took the initiative and padded out of the shelter. She stopped a few yards away from the spruce and raised her muzzle to check the wind. Her posture indicated that she was looking for safer ground or a sense of prey. Bristled, but did nothing to stop her. Maybe he thought it was an essential step to the pack's survival, or maybe he was just too exhausted to step in and stop the younger man from edging closer to follow. But, with a pointed gesture of reverence, Thor tensed up and let forth a ragged snarl. Every time the inferior male Drew lowered his head, this little drama reenacted the main problem of the pack. Alpha aggression was threatened by cooperative activity, particularly following the series of encounters Luna had the day before. She was forced to remain with her puppies, and the swirl-furred one let out another weak cry, each note tinged with. Mar's own chest tightened to the sound, revealing a devastating fragility. Newborn wolves can actually die. Luna's unshakable dedication has kept both pups alive for hours if they were unable to suckle or retain body heat. Living through the storm, but now, in the thin light of the dawn, the mother's eyes displayed fatigue that bordered on despair. Marta observed as the submissive woman continued to sniff the air and periodically cocked her head to listen. She seems conflicted about finally rejoining the group or going alone. The female took a long lope farther into the trees after giving Luna one last look, and it appeared that she was trying a one-wolf scouting mission in the hopes of finding a more convenient food, similar to what Carrion found after the storm, or a more appropriate den site. But Marta was unsure if Thor would view this as initiative or treachery. Dispute, but instead of being furious, the alpha just watched her leave with a huff that showed annoyance. The swirl-furred pup stumbled as he limped back towards Luna, who was attempting to move the puppies onto dry pine needles. Mar was afraid he might see the pup, as the alpha lowered his muzzle to latch and cautiously sniffed for a heartbeat. A genetic defect to be removed, but Thor delivered a low, frustrated, grunting as if unsure of how to handle this strange small thing. Then, unexpectedly, he made a small move by lying down, bringing his body close enough to partially block the wind. Yet extremely important in wolf society, since Thor was able to lie so close to. Luna uttered a faint note of relief, admitting the pup's position in the pack, if reluctantly. She gently pushed the infant with the swirl fur up against Thor's flank, where it discovered a tiny patch of warmth. The mother and alpha claimed the best position close to them, while the younger male hovered just beyond them, shifting restlessly. The pup's condition was unclear. He was hurt and unnoticed. He most likely felt little motivation to continue being subservient, and Marta was concerned that unless the pack found a coherent course of action for the time being, but he maintained his distance, perhaps recalling Thor's strong nighttime involvement as dawn illuminated the damp woodland, glistened with drops that caught the first rays of the morning, allowing Marta to view the swirl-furred puppy in greater detail for the first time. Its ears had a tiny curl, its eyes were still locked, and the irregular patches on its back trembled as if trapped in a personal fantasy, possibly one of survival or belonging in a universe that seems intent on testing it at every opportunity. While watching the scenario, Marta had a strange optimism that the inferior female's reconnaissance mission might bring food or a safer area. The youngster had not been completely rejected by Thor, and Luna's union with maternal drive provided some security if the pack may finally have an opportunity to regain trust after the Rangers successfully drove the intruder away. Resources they were in dire need of. Yet in the wild, things change quickly even as. When the last of the storm clouds dissipated, Mar realized that the day would bring new dangers that would compete with predators. The younger male's attempt to gain control, or the pup's incapacity to adjust in the quiet. Of that delicate morning when a swirl-furred puppy was struggling to life and steam was rising off damp fur, she quietly captured every aspect, unsure if she was recording the last scene of a tragic saga or the initial glimpse of it. Unbelievably, triumph sunshine broke through the remaining mist to expose a countryside. When the submissive female eventually returned from her nighttime storm, Marta held her breath, still pouring from it. She had no visible prey on her scouting expedition, but her eyes were sparkling. The pack members gradually stirred each other, giving her an indication that she could have found something valuable. Luna lay next to Thor, who was still protecting the swirl-furred, as the wolf registered her entrance with a mixture of skepticism and hope. The younger male braced as the alpha's muzzle trembled with each ragged breath, showing signs of persistent suffering. He sprang up on 3 legs, his ears cocked forward as if to confront the returning woman. As the swirl, the furred pup was quieter now, and its breathing was shallow but consistent if it had food and shelter, or restore unity. The moment had arrived for a provisional demonstration of solidarity. With her ears flattened, tail down, snout dipped, and subservient posture, the subordinate female walked up to Thor and let off a. Under the spruce trees, Marta heard a series of gentle whines that seemed to be encouraging him to accompany her outside the small nook. Despite his exhaustion, Thor was acutely aware that an alpha in pain could misread a subordinate signal. Marta sensed her curiosity as he lifted Ed himself, snarling under his breath, and took a few shaky steps forward. Heart skipped a beat as the female turned to Luna, and the younger male, Rose, seemed unwilling to leave, giving a comforting nuzzle before darting into the bushes and pausing briefly to look back. It was a. Luna hesitated, sending a worried, wordless invitation to come see what I found. Observe her pups. The swirl-fur newborn in particular appeared too frail to withstand another place. But if the mother had, after a tense moment, Luna might have their best chance of surviving if they discovered a dire hollow or an abandoned den. Scruff scooped up the more robust pup, and the subordinate female went back around, and Thor maintained a stiff watch position as if he were softly lifting the swirl-furred one. The younger man just stepped in front of them, tail drooping, challenging the younger male to move. The group started an unexpected session, united by necessity with guarded respect. Marta kept a safe distance behind her, navigating through tangled undergrowth and glittering pine needles. If the subordinate female's discovery was insufficient or if the intruder returned, the vulnerable, she ventured to dream that the pack might find a fleeting window of refuge, even though stability could collapse again. Like the final test to see if they could actually work as a family or break up permanently, they didn't go very far. The terrain was around 200 yards until the woman led them to a narrow hole protected by a fallen log. Notably taller, and the pine branches above created a natural canopy, albeit one that was nonetheless damp in this new location. Provided protection from any remaining rain runoff. One by one, the wolves moved into the hole, carefully placing. As she checked the air with the subordinate female, her first pup's down nose trembled. Placed the swirl-fur puppy next to its guardian sibling until Luna could move them. Thor paced. The younger male took up a station on the opposite flank and looked about, periodically wincing from a shoulder wound. The subordinate female lingered occasionally at the alpha, as if to determine whether aggression was still imminent. Marta felt that these two women had established a bond while they were close Luna, exchanging soft whines. A tenuous but genuine bond through their teamwork and shared caring of the puppies had, at least temporarily, neutralized Thor's previous animosity, enabling the swirl-furred newborn to continue. Opportunity at life in the quiet of the late morning, Marta became aware that she was seeing the pivotal moment of approval. If this new den worked well, the pack may unite around its wounded members and new babies, creating a. Keeping the appearance of order, she positioned herself behind a cedar camera to keep the swirl-furred puppy motionless. The mother wolf curled when the baby made a slight sound that caught Luna's attention. The puppy writhed around it, pushing her warm tummy against its wet fur. Mar felt a rush of comfort when she latched onto the nurse after mewing once. A distant stir caused everyone to freeze for the first time since dawn that she had witnessed the puppy eating uninterrupted. With a low growl, Thor raised his nose, and the younger man tensed even more. Luna stopped nursing her ears and turned around, tensely anticipating the armed intruder to emerge brandishing a rifle. But after, two ravens fluttered wildly overhead for several agonizing seconds, probably attracted by. Thor growled and snapped at the air, scattering them into the air, releasing the smell of afterlife or maybe scavenging. Canopy crisis avoided, at least temporarily, with the current danger gone. The group appeared to exhale simultaneously, with the younger male perhaps feeling more confident because, limping forward, the successful translocation sniffed the swirl-furred pup. Thor's ears twitched, but he maintained his composure in front of the subservient woman. For a brief while, the younger male and female moaned softly, seemingly to encourage wider acceptance of the infant. Tension bristling, Alpha's eyes met, and the younger wolf bowed his head made an appeasement gesture and backed up a little distance, giving Luna and her puppies the uninterrupted space they required. Despite the wounds and chaos the pack was dealing with, Marta's heart pounded with cautious confidence. In the face of hardship, the swirl-furred puppy is a symbol of unity. First lay tucked away between siblings and grown-ups, each of whom had made a unique contribution to it. She wasn't naive about the protection. The pup was still dangerously vulnerable, and the wolves, under constant stress, especially with hunger pressing, partnerships could break out if one person makes a mistake. Invasion, a devastating pack battle, or an infection might break out. Everything, but during this brief moment, the pack had decided to prioritize cooperation and survival over immediate. In the harsh reality of the woods, the battle was as near to a miracle as Marta could have imagined. Thor fell to his. Raindrops glittered on his fur as he sat at the entrance of the depression, eyeing the trees with tired attention. Because of the difficulties he had faced the day before, Luna returned to nursing eyes. The subordinate female, half-lidded with fatigue, slept next to her, providing warmth and sporadic gentle. Finally, even the younger male calmed down, and for the first time since the swirl, a weary huff assumed a sentinel role. After the pup was delivered, the pack exuded a shaky sense of peace that resulted from shared suffering and the glimmer of trust between people. Marta lowered her camera slightly, allowing. The last moments of this remarkable scene were captured by the lens. This was the AAD's climax, fashioned by nature's unrelenting demands and each wolf's vulnerabilities, tempered by a mother's unwavering resolve, regardless of what happened next. A rare and delicate story's ending could be either victorious or tragic, but for the time being, at least life continued. A soft breeze was blowing through that remote hollow while holding a peculiar puppy who, against all odds, had found a home. Above the newly selected hollow, the pine needles rustled, bearing the promise and the lingering aroma of the ling rain, of a new beginning. But fatigue gripped each member of the wolf pack. They had negotiated a hellish maelstrom of difficulties during the night, including violent encounters, human encroachment, and brewing internal conflicts as the sun's rays started to penetrate. The canopy, the group teetered on the edge of true unity and survival, while Marta stayed, unmoving behind her blanket. Her heart was still beating from the drama of the night. She had hardly slept when the swirl flickered. Even though she marveled, the tiny life of the fur pup required her to be always vigilant. Although it was far from ideal, the mud still clung to the spot where the pack's senses had led them to this temporary sanctuary. Although all of Poe and Thor's wounds appeared to be dangerously swollen, it provided some relief from the waterlogged den location. Luna slept, thinking that if they could cling to a shaky fragment, this new location might turn into a stable haven. The swirl-furred pup, whose motions were weak but persistent, with its muzzle resting on top of its body. Occasionally, the mother, as if to remind the puppy that it belonged here in spite of its rough coat, the wolf woke up to brush it. Strange appearance close by, the more powerful gray sister wriggled towards Luna's warmth, despite the fact that neither pup was able to observe or understand the chaos of the previous day. They responded to the gentle The balance that had been established over the whole was periodically disturbed by their gentle squeaks of hunger or discomfort. Thor released a strained breath, causing Luna, or the submissive female, to reposition the pine needles and straw for more warmth. Breathe, however, positioned himself close to the hollow's tight entrance like a guard intent on thwarting any danger. He had fought off wolves and intruders all night long, and although his body was bruised, it still refused to give up. Unbroken Marta felt a surge of admiration for the dominant guy in her breast. Beneath the aggression and power, there was a strong determination to protect his pack, including the odd newcomer who would have otherwise been rejected at A. The inferior girl and the younger male maintained a respectful distance, expressing their bond through body language and subdued whines. Created in the crucible of shared wounds, seems to straddle the line between allegiance to the alpha pair and a subtle hint of insurrection, but for the time being, they focused their energies on the swirl fur pup survival. Together, the younger male's attentiveness and the submissive female's identification of this hollow had proven crucial. While the pack was still recovering, being at the edge helped prevent any possible disruptions. Its unity was stronger, both literally and emotionally, than it had ever been since Luna's difficult labor. Marta carefully. As she moved her camera around the tableau, a knot started to grow in her throat. She documented victories and tragedies during her years of research, including wolf pups dying from illness, sibling rivalry that turned deadly as exiled loners forged new paths, violence. But the mother's refusal to leave felt particularly painful in this time. Her strange-looking son, an alpha male, struggles to lead under pressure, and followers find A. If the swirl for pups survived, it would be more than a glimmer of unity in the midst of the chaos. Her radio sent off a gentle buzz, signifying the pack's ability to adapt and a monument to individual tenacity. And she lifted it to her ear. Vessa's voice was quiet, as if she understood how serious the situation was with the Rangers. Having gone back to base, they think the armed intruder fled the park's perimeter, and there are no new footprints on the way back. The best news we could hope for is that she felt a wave of relief. She whispered back, hoping the wolves could now concentrate on their recuperation. Are you planning to? Marta gave the wolves a persistent glance to stay longer, at least until. The swirl fair pup is still weak, but I'm sure they've stabilized it. I want to see if it can continuously nurse. Stay safe, Deshawn said, and we'll be ready if anything changes as the sun rises. Ascending higher, the dampness started to give way to warmth. Thor took a brief. The younger guy sniffed around, as if assessing the area for any lingering human scent, a considerable distance from the hole. Followed, but he maintained a cautious distance because nobody wanted the fights from that night to happen again. Luna took advantage of the lull to completely nurse both pups, one of whom wriggled against its mother's stomach. Marta recorded each second as they let out tiny, anxious squeaks that eventually subsided in a happy suckling. Keeping careful track of the puppy's feeding schedule, the minute variations in the wolf's body language, and the continuous power dynamic, but she wasn't positive the swirl-furred puppy would survive because nature is cruel. Thor's wound infection in the wild might potentially be used by the alpha or by a competitor predator. The pack's susceptibility, but for the moment, the delicate equilibrium held. Every wolf found a role, from Thor to the younger male's perimeter guard to the submissive female's caretaking. Reluctantly put up with the swirl-furred pup providing body heat when Luna needed to sleep as the middle of the day drew near. Assumed a softer brightness, accentuated by slanting rays that brought attention to the wolf's moist fur. Marta gave herself a. She had a brief moment of emotion and trembled, but she was still an observer, constrained by the limited interference. But she had a deep concern for these animals' well-being because their tale went beyond just survival. It was about relationships put to the test under harsh conditions, about how cruel nature can be, and, eventually, with sympathy, the SW Swirl furred dog fell asleep in a cozy bundle. Luna, its stronger twin, slept fitfully at intervals, occasionally waking up to a sound or a. Thor stood guard for a while longer before descending with a moan and half-lidded eyes all around them. The forest started its morning rhythm with the rustle of tiny birds and distant bird calls. Following the chaos and storm, a slight breeze whispers through the conifers, bringing back the normalcy of life. When Marta checked her camera's battery one more time, rhythms felt almost miraculous. Focused herself on the sleeping wolf. This was the last chapter she would write down in her notes before stealthily leaving. She intended to keep the pack at a safer distance, so they could fully recuperate socially, physically, and emotionally. Unaware of her constant presence, a rush of appreciation rose as she thought back on the saga she had seen. Was evidence of how hardship may either drive a community to unity or cause it to break apart. The tiny third pup had contested every wolf instinct, from Luna's steadfast maternal drive to Thor's rigorous dominance, and in doing so, consequently, it has shown the dormant ability to collaborate under the most trying circumstances, whether that the flimsy pup would either grow into a healthy yearling or perish in the harsh, unpredictable natural environment. A query for time to respond to, taking a last deep breath, and silently collected her belongings before sneaking off, raising her radio one last time for a message. "I'm finishing up here." Said that both pups are alive, and the group is resting in a different den location. There is a silence over the depression, as if the forest itself is the turning point for the furred one who is still struggling. Permitted for a few moments with her heart full and the memory card in her camera full of admiration for these wolves' tenacity, Marta started her gradual retreat around the vortex. The furred puppy stayed close to Luna's fur, a tiny creature that had defied. In that wordless farewell, Mar hoped that nature's cruel odds would hold for one more day, resist them long enough to expand Rome, and eventually preserve the tenacious nature that made United a beleaguered pack. We appreciate you joining us on this very emotional journey against the storm in the center of Yellowstone. If you enjoyed this tale, please like and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with friends who enjoy wildlife stories to help us out, and make sure to click on the next one too. Keep discovering the wonders and difficulties of nature's most ferocious creatures. Your participation enables us to bring more true stories to share with you that showcase the strong ties and remarkable fortitude that characterize the. Together, let's continue exploring the amazing tales that lie beyond the trail in this wild world.